The way we look at resilience has broadened. The pandemic now and the war demonstrating now have affected the infrastructure such as health services and fiber connectivity. We know that these infrastructures have come under significant strain during unexpected demand fluctuations. While others like hospitality and airline have been brutally impacted, leading to almost complete closure. Many infrastructure players have started to ask whether their assets could react quickly to sudden shocks. And that being said, we do believe that change has created a seismic shift in the way governments and asset owners look at resilience planning. Decisions are no longer made solely based on probability and expected cost, but rather on ensuring how essential services can continue to operate under all scenarios. So bringing on this thought today, I would like to invite our panel and hear from them about their thoughts on resilience, how to steer your organization through radical change. Our first panelist, Shilpa Advani. Shilpa is a founder of an amazing women's group called She Mantra, a community of women founders in coaching and consulting domain. Welcome, Shilpa. She has 25 years of illustrious MNC experience. In her role, she also has won the CEO of 2017 award by the Economic Times Polymer Awards while she was heading Tupperware India. Shilpa is now the founder of and the CEO of Uno Mantra, a business strategy consulting and leadership advisory firm that specializes in enabling consumer-centric and lifestyle businesses to grow. She's passionate about creating iconic brands, leaders, communities, and organizations using her purpose positioning or could you say that for me, Shilpa?
Positioning.
Yes, approach. She actively supports impact initiatives. Warm welcome, Shilpa.
Thank you, Anjani. Pleasure being with all of you today.
Thank you. Our next panelist, Sanjeev Navangul, illustrious and of course very well known in the pharma industry, Managing Director and CEO of Bharat Serums and Vaccine Limited. Sanjeev is widely recognized and acknowledged professional in pharma business, and under his leadership, a host of global pharma companies have achieved operational success. In his diverse career span of 30 years, Sanjeev has experienced entrepreneurship and served on various boards. Sanjeev is a recipient of several industry awards on health, marketing, and diversity. Sanjeev is also an award winner for Asia by within 100 business leaders in Asia for 2022 by Economic Times. Welcome on board, Sanjeev. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Finally, our third panelist today, Dr. Vishal Shah. Dr. Vishal is a VP Leadership and Organization Development with Indegene. Dr. Vishal brings with him a judicious mix of corporate and academic backgrounds. A passion for people and people development is a common thread that runs through his career. Over a span of 22 years, he's worked in industries like IT services, fintech, and retail, and has handled diverse roles in HR, sales, and consulting. Dr. Vishal has completed his MBA as well as PhD from IIM Bangalore and has published in international journals and presented in international conferences worldwide. A PCC coach himself, Vishal's passion is working with culture and values. Welcome on board, Dr. Vishal Shah.
Thank you so much.
And finally, our moderator, Prashant Menon, a coach, a friend, an entrepreneur, and an amazing human being. Prashant has completed 2 PG programs in marketing after graduating in microbiology. Previously a managing director at Exceltis India, he has held various business head level positions across leading MNCs in pharmaceutical industry. As the co-founder of Bent the Coach, Prashant brings sensibility and patience to our team. Most importantly, he is experienced Marshall Goldsmith coach and an executive coach, and is also a faculty at India's one of India's top 10 management institutes. With this illustrious panel at Forthright Conversation, our endeavor is to bring together diverse experiences, geographies, and stories to find out how this has impacted organizational decisions, especially in this age of radical changes. We want our listeners to draw inspiration. Resilience looks different for everyone. It can be based on assumptions, beliefs, or circumstances. We want to have candid conversations. We want our resilience to find their perspective, our listeners to find their perspective. We want to start a revolution of sorts. On that note, over to you, Prashant.
Thank you so much, Anjani. And thank you everybody for joining in on a Saturday evening. And thanks panelists for having a nice time from your busy schedule. 270 million search results appear on typing the word resilience in the Google search bar. 17 million results on the Microsoft Bing. And as you start getting a little more narrowed down on your search, on the Forbes in the last 1 year, there have been close to 482 published articles related to resilience. 409 is the count on HBR. What this tells us? This tells us about the search for resilience is constantly getting higher and focused as well. Being resilient means facing difficulties head on instead of falling into despair or using an unhealthy coping strategy. Resilience is often defined as the mental reservoir of strength that helps people handle stress and hardships. And that was a very interesting definition, I thought. And as we step into this panel that talks about managing resilience in organizations during this rapid change, I wanted to put some context with regards to resilience from an individual or from a leader's point of view. What do resilient people do? They generally get things to happen. They also are aware of the kind of sufferings and struggles that is en route this journey. And hence, the high willingness to pursue that makes them resilient. They're the ones who selectively choose the right things to focus on and the ones that they can change. And how do they do that? What we've seen is most often resilient people are generally threat focused. They're also stressed responses, which they display by not diminishing the negatives. What they rather do is actually work on them and turn those instances into goods. There's a very intentional, deliberate, ongoing effort to make things happen. And I have seen often resilient leaders ask a very powerful question. What am I going to do that is going to be helping me or harming me? And you build resilience by three things. One, by changing your perspective, choosing your response, and importantly, finding a sense of purpose. And I came across this interesting talk show where there was a very relevant point that spoke about resilience as I step into the panel. What you have to know if you're a resilient person is not that how you look to get back to work. As the world gets back to work, resilient people look forward to work. And that's the context that I thought I must actually set when we are talking about this panel of resilience. And I'm going to ask my first question to the lady here, Shilpa. And as I ask the question, please allow me to share the screen of the question so it is beneficial to the entire audience in terms of what we're going to look at. So the first question that comes up to Shilpa is, with a lot of experience that you've had, Shilpa, over the last decades in terms of running organizations and today as a consultant, what's your guide to building a resilient organization during these times of rapid change?
So, Prashant, thanks for this question. What a relevant way to begin this conversation and open it. So, resilience in an organizational context is the ability of an organization to anticipate, plan for, respond to, and emerge effectively from an unforeseen challenge, right? In a way, the reservoir that you spoke about for an individual or an individual leader, I think also applies to an organization. And the bigger that reservoir, the ability to bounce back is directly proportional to that. So how does one really build a resilient organization in these times of change? We all know organizations today are faced with political pressures, environmental pressures, competitive pressures, technological pressures, economic pressures. There's no dearth of pressure. Ask any CEO today, what keeps him awake at night? And it's not just one answer, right? So in this context, how does one really build resilience in the organization? To me, it always starts with anchoring the organization and rooting it in its purpose. A ship which is firmly anchored can weather any storm, right? And today, leading a business, running an organization is really about weathering storms all the time, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that anchor called purpose is so critical. It's not just a nice to have, it's become a must have. And organizations that invest time in revealing their purpose, in aligning their strategy to that purpose, in positioning their brand to that purpose, and attracting employees, consumers, and stakeholders who are also aligned to that purpose are the ones who can really weather this storm effectively. So to me, it really starts with purpose. The next thing is that you need resilient leaders to build resilient organizations. So leadership, I think, is a word we all know, but I mean, the context of that really is completely changing today. You need leaders who are committed to that purpose, who live that purpose, and the way they operate on an everyday basis, just their presence tells an organization that we are all about collaboration, communication, connection, and creation. If a leader can really foster that environment constantly, you create a lot of preparation. Because today it is not enough to just respond when a crisis happens. It is equally important to be able to anticipate the crisis well in time. There are organizations who were already investing in technology way before the pandemic. They were experimenting with distributed workforces. They were already looking at distributing their supply chains across the globe. And this was all being done proactively. So guess what happened? Who won when a pandemic suddenly got everybody in the state of lockdown one fine day, right? So this is a very important attribute, which I discuss a lot even with my clients, that what's our ability to anticipate that, not just respond when a challenge emerges, right? So that's going to be very, very critical. So leadership. The third is really the ability to self-disrupt proactively. Usually we associate disruption with challenger brands, startups, but today everybody is challenged to self-disrupt themselves proactively, which means we don't wait for a competitor, we don't wait for a policy change from the government, but we look at possibly all the threats, the risks that could emerge. And we also look at positive factors. Today, consumers are changing, lifestyles are changing, new needs are emerging. So if we are close to the ground, we can tap into those insights and proactively self-disrupt. To me, that's really creating a competitive advantage versus anybody else out there, right? The next is an important word, and I never use it lightly. The word is trust. And the speed of trust creates agility, flexibility like no other. And they say trust is created in good times and it is tested in bad times,
yep.
Right? And we saw enough examples of organizations which were high on the trust index. They didn't have to bother about keeping tabs on whether the employees were actually sleeping at home or Netflixing or actually working, whether the others were paranoid because they just had no idea, no clue if they could really believe their people when they said that I'm on this assignment and it will be delivered by tonight. So we saw extremes in terms of reactions happening there. And the big differentiator was trust, right? And last but not the least, I would say embrace people and culture as a great opportunity to become a more resilient organization. It's an important strategic pillar in any case. But imagine if you have a culture that supports bounce back, that supports collaboration, that supports social connection between employees. How much better is that rather than restrictive, highly structured, hierarchical workplaces, where even a small piece of communication doesn't travel down in 3 days, right? So this is where we need to use people and culture as a very big advantage. And today, I think diversity, equity, inclusion, belongingness, these are not nice words again. They have the ability to transform an organization into a very resilient organization. So we have to invite different perspectives. We have to invite people with shared values, but at the same time, the ability to challenge status quo. And that's where they enable us to self-disrupt, even before we are disrupted as an organization from the outside. So that's what I would say is so critical to building a resilient organization of today and tomorrow.
Very, very comprehensive. I think Shilpa, you actually stirred quite a lot of interest areas, and each one probably is worth a session. I'm just going to pick your brains on one aspect. I find a great challenge when I talk to a lot of people and leaders today is in the ability to anticipate. We very often get into our cushions of comfort and our cushions of know-how that we aren't very vulnerable, we aren't very humble to learn to anticipate things better. In your experience, what would be your probably one trick of the trade to tell an organization on what route they can take to anticipate better?
So I have actually done this, addressing leaders, CXOs, even in my very first meetings. I am a little provocative. So I walk in purposely with a set of binoculars and a magnifying glass. And I said, as a leader, when you walk into the office, just remember that you need both. So in your right hand, let there be a magnifying glass. In your left hand, let there be binoculars. And make sure that you know when to start to use either of them. Because you need to be able to guide where your troops need to go. So from time to time, you'll actually have to climb up the trees, look for danger, threats, assess them, and then come down and say that, okay, how does the ground look? Which way do we move forward? And, though people laugh at it, but it opens up the room every time for a conversation to say that how often do we pick up the binoculars in our organization, and how often are we just focused on just the everyday, today, right now only, right? And the same can be extrapolated in so many different connotations. For example, the micro versus the macro, right? The immediate threat versus the threats we don't even know as yet. So it's not even enough to scout within your industry, but look at, outside of your industry as well, right? And sometimes when I'm with smaller organizations, they say, Shilpa, but we don't have enough resources. I said, okay, do you have 2 people? Then one of you become the future, binocular person, and one person holds the magnifying glass. Can you do that? And both of you are accountable in updating each other in terms of how are we tackling the now and the next. So that's how I would like to answer.
That's good. That's a nice one, and I'm for sure going to anticipate some little bump up in sales of binoculars and magnifying glasses post the session to start with. My next question comes to Vishal, and Vishal, there's been this very, very interesting aspect. And your background is, is very interesting, I must say. You really have a flair of multiple aspects. And the question to Vishal goes about, you've been seeing this quite often, and there's been a lot of talk of the hybrid culture going to stay on for a long period of time. And depending on the kind of workspace that the organization belongs to, how does hybrid culture impact the agility to build resilience? Because earlier, when you had people either in person co-located or you have them separately, when you have got a hybrid culture in place, where do you see the scope to build resilience? And what kind of challenges would you, as a leader, witness in this aspect?
Sure, thanks. I would say that actually the way you asked the question is the right way to do it. I don't know if I have solutions, but in fact, I think currently it is really about asking the questions around the challenges, right? So, for example, organizations have had, let's say, a specific way of working, a specific culture, and then the pandemic happened, and several organizations, including mine, for example, for one, have seen a lot of growth in terms of business and people. But the challenge is that suddenly the employee population is very different, right? So it's spread across, it's diverse. It's people who've not been to office, they've joined new, they've not been to office. They've come from multiple companies, and so now there are like different organizations within the organization, right? So there's this kind of organization, there's a talent pool from that kind of organization. So it's become a melting pot, right? So, and in this, really, resilience is about. It's a question we are really asking very seriously as to how do we carry forward the strengths of the culture that was there, as well as build new, right? So what do we drop? What do we continue? What do we build, right? So the soul that we preserve and the muscle that we build, right? And how do we kind of look at this? And that's a great question to kind of, and we are, there are no right answers. We're trying out different things in terms of, let's say, very, very small group interactions, for example, getting people to really articulate what they are seeing, getting a sense of whether the culture that we were proud of, the organizations that have, the people that have joined recently, are they actually experiencing this, for example, right? So actually, this is a question that right now we're in the middle of raising and trying to get a sense of. So that's really one. I would say by helping organizations ask the right questions, for example, right? So we all know about the Great Resignation. Again, in several organizations, especially tech-led, IT-led, post the pandemic, for example, business has seen a lot of growth, right? So, but the challenge is around talent, right? The Great Resignation, and people are really struggling to retain talent, right? And fundamentals of hybrid really raises questions around what is the employee contract, what is work all about, right? Who wants to stay back? Who wants to leave? Why did people work earlier with us? Why do they want to leave? Right? And what will kind of keep them back? Right? So these are questions that, in some sense, organizations are forced to confront. And you said this, right? It's about confronting, right? And I think Shilpa also said that. So, and really, what is it that we provide to employees as a value proposition? It's the next question that we are trying to answer, and many organizations are, I'm sure, right? So in this, that what is it that will really? So that's again a question that probably will be related to this whole thing of resilience, as to who are we, what are we about, what is it that we offer to employees. All of us were going to office on one fine day, then suddenly we switch to this entire offline mode, all of us, right? And now we are kind of trying this mixed thing, right? So a mix of, so it's a third phase, right? So in office, all offline, and now a mix of offline plus online. And then you have some very interesting questions coming up as to, is there equity? Is there fair representation? People who are working offline, are they getting enough space, enough visibility? People who are spending more time in office, do they have a natural advantage? Is this fair? And if as an organizations, we are saying that, look, we want to leverage talent everywhere. diversity is important. Geographical diversity is important. Then we have to make actually efforts to minimize these differences, right? Because clearly, hybrid work poses challenges in terms of, visibility, representation, whose voice is being heard, for example, right? Etc. Right? And so these are some other questions, right? So, for example, you have now deliberate office days, right? So what is the best use of this time in office if I'm going twice a week, thrice a week, right? So how should meeting be structured now? What is office time for? And which are the processes that we had which we can really do away with now, right? So re-examining the whole way which work, processes kind of got built up one over the other. In the hybrid world, are we just trying to replicate the old way of working or looking at new things? I think these are some of these questions that really we've been forced to confront. And I think questions that are organizations that are able to answer some of these questions well, probably kind of, as you said, what strengthens us versus what works against us, right? And those dimensions will help. So these are some of my thoughts.
I mean, very, very, very insightful and very meaningful questions. And I believe, the more you're honest with these answers to these questions, you might probably become finding. You spoke about a lot of diverse cultures coming into organizations today, and I guess that's the name of the game, whether companies are spread across geographies or companies are spread across let's say nationalities and cultures within companies who take over a lot of companies. There are a lot of cultures that start getting embedded into probably the prime or the parent organization. What would be one obstacle that you would see in a diverse culture there, where resilience can be an obstacle? What would that come to your mind?
So in fact, just yesterday we were speaking about this. When we speak of hybrid, it's also a hybrid organization where now different generations are working, right, in the organization. And for example, this mix of generations, I think, is beginning to pose a serious challenge. For example, as I said, we were just talking about yesterday, people of a much younger generation, they are joining. This is coinciding with the whole virtual and hybrid work, etc. Right? So this is another trend and these people come and say, for example, look, at one end, I keep hearing from everyone that everyone's calendars have kind of just gone berserker, right? So you're working all the time, and right now people who are coming in, especially the younger generation, they are emphasizing mental health. They're really emphasizing work-life balance. Right. On the other hand, other generations may have different values around this, right? So people, for example, in the younger generation, a very specific example we were talking about yesterday, when a supervisor asks them to do something, the person challenges them and says that, but why can't you get this done yourself? And I can tell you 3 ways to do it, right? And the supervisor says, I can't believe this. I never behaved like this. But this is not just one instance, right? So this generation clash and the way people are looking at this. So, cultural clashes. And now you have to deal with this across your own geography, in another geography, etc. Right? So things are becoming very complex culturally, right? And the ability to navigate this, for example.
Okay. I hope the person didn't use the reverse mentoring as the strategy in that aspect of pushing it back to the supervisor. But thanks Vishal, for your thoughts on that. And I would now move to a much more macro kind of a topic. I mean, I think with Sanjeev here, that's going to be very, very essential, is on, there are business cycles that keep happening. There are ups, there are downs, and we've all seen the economy hit us. And at your level, you've been witnessing this for more than a decade now in terms of the kind of growth. And there's been resilience that also correlates or accompanies these kind of business cycles. Where would you look at what kind of correlation works, and if there is a need to manage that? That would be a thought from your end, Sanjeev, on where do you see this happening?
Good evening, Prashant. First of all, thanks for inviting me. I see the wise guy Vivek Hattangdi around, so I
Yes.
must be careful of what I say. Yeah. But you know, first of all, whenever we think of cycles and situations and resilience, a couple of things starkly comes as images. One is the image of this the Birbal story of a cat drowning, and and the second one is of the famous, probably the most feted um, uh, mountain climber Reinhold Messner, who said that there is only one skill required for mountaineering, and that's resilience. So, so I think, yeah, I think you're right, Prashant. Organizations see it over a longer period of time, see a lot of ups and downs. And the reason is because of many circumstances. And the circumstances could be internal, external, created, sometimes self-created, as I think Shilpa mentioned that, you know, on organizational culture. So there are possibilities of these happening. Now, I think what we need to understand that organizational culture is a very, very composite but amorphous kind of story. We keep lecturing on what organizational culture should be and how it is built and all, but ultimately it's reasonably amorphous because it moves based on how situations emerge. It builds over a period, but it moves based on situations. And what we have seen over the years is that the organizations that look at business cycles with equanimity and look at with a situation that look, things will happen. Yeah. And Shilpa used a very good word called purpose. But I would go further than purpose and say that employees come to work because they have a job, but employees perform because they have a cause. And that cause is much bigger than everything else. Fortunately, in our industry, you know, I think if I make it a little bit narrow to healthcare industry, it's an easier thing. And it's easier to explain, easier to understand that what a cause could be, because you see the impact of the cause very acutely, and therefore you're more responsible. I don't call it a social business because that's trying to, you know, create a new jargon to please some language which is acceptable, I would say. But I think what we do realize that we are in an industry where we do good and do well. So this is particularly unique. The organizations that are able to make this understand its employees that what cause are they after and what are they solving for, create much better discipline in terms of responding to situations, because they know that their cause is so much bigger that even if business goes up or down, it doesn't matter. You know, I think this is a situational thing. Ultimately, whatever I do is leading to a better cause. So you have to elevate organizations to that level and employees to that level to understand that they are in it for a much bigger thing. Last 2 years also told us the same thing. You know, I wherever I was all around in talking to employees, in fact, getting people on shop floor, on the manufacturing floor, third day into the pandemic lockdown, yeah, was something that they had to explain to their families that why they are taking the risk. They had to explain to the village sarpanch to explain why they are leaving their homes and going because there were blockades there. Absolutely. How do you explain that? And that resilience is built in with the system that you are really working for something much more than your own self. And once people see that not more as a sacrifice, but more as somebody you're contributing to society, I think people get it better. So each organization needs to understand, first of all, to really ask a very basic question as what are they doing? It's not about what business we are in, but what cause they are in. And I think most of the times we try to make it very, what can I say? I don't want to use the word puerile, but make it very simple to say that what business are we in? Yeah. I don't think it is relevant. The more relevant is what cause are you in? And that explanation is very, very important. The other things organizations have also to fear is that morale of employees is not the same with everybody. Don't treat your employees as a group of people. Don't treat them as a mob. No, you need to have your own attitudinal segmentation of your own employees. There are people who are leaders, there are rebels, there are followers, there are all kinds of people in an organization. But then are you appealing to each of these audience differently? So organizations, leadership, policies, everything will have to answer to these attitude situations. And once they answer them, I'm not saying customize your replies, but at least ensure that you answer these questions on their mind. Yeah, it cannot be a situation where employees feel that they're doing something which is not relevant for anyone. I don't think that works well. So what we have also seen is organizations which are deeply conscious of these things do well over a longer period of time. And there are many, many examples. It's difficult to sometimes name companies, but what comes to my mind is, you imagine an organization which goes through serious ups and downs, like the automotive companies today. The organizations that felt that market is there forever and our technology is there.
You got on mute, Sanjeev. Yes.
Yeah. So the organizations that those organizations died.
Yeah.
Currently, suddenly you're seeing an organization in India with launch of EV vehicles is trying to prosper well because they went through that change, including buying higher technology company some years back. And I'm purposely not naming some of those because it's not appropriate. But you see that you see India's healthcare industry as a whole. I think it has gone through a lot in terms of where it started, what happened. You also saw the frenetic attack that happened with the regulatory institutions from different countries on the Indian manufacturing system.
Manufacturing,
yeah. But did people give up and say, no, the market is not ours or the situation is not ours? I think people tried to upgrade themselves. So what resilience also leads to in organizations is tries to upgrade yourself, upgrade your skills, thinking, attitude, the way of doing your jobs. So everything is a very big composite for that. And therefore, only organizations that will understand how to be resilient in different cycles will be sustainable organizations. Sustainability of organizations is so much important because that's a social ecosystem. Many families are dependent on organizations and their livelihoods are dependent. So there is far more to an organization just the employees in the business. So the reason that resilience is important in organization is because it has to ensure that it feeds and of livelihoods of many people at the same time as it does its business, contributes to society, and continues to prosper. So there are several things that an organization need to monitor that. So I think I've probably given a very macro level of answer, but this is what comes to my mind over years of experience that I have seen.
Lovely. I think a lot of pertinent points that you brought about, and I just wanted a quick comment on a very important aspect you touched upon is the cause. What would be one derailer to an employee not understanding the cause as per you?
It's I think first of all, if an employee doesn't understand the cause, first of all, it's the leader's failure. I think let's first attribute failure where it should be. What happens is you always say that an organization has politics, organization has negative environment, or somebody is sending negative vibes. It's not about the person. It's about your appeal of cause to the person has not held through. And therefore, the person starts thinking inward and start thinking about what's happening to himself or herself. And that is causing harm there. Because then the person is not able to rise above the basics and say that this is, I'm not against individuality. I'm not saying that employees are not human enough to have different moods and different situations. But at every given point of time, they should be able to answer the question, why am I here? And if they're able to answer the question reasonably also, then you don't find that. But otherwise, the organizations, go through real mess. We have seen organizations that have gone through real disaster because of culture and because of employees who do not manage themselves properly or don't understand the cause.
Very nice. Thanks a lot. I'm beginning to get in questions. Let the questions come in. I'm going to have one more round of questions to the panelists before I move to the next one. Moving back to Shilpa. Shilpa, you've been working a lot with the startups today post your active corporate role, and I guess this is really fertile grounds. I mean, you really can either make or break, and we all know how much this was the backbone of the Indian economy, and it still continues to be. What would be your advice to MSMEs to become a lot more resilient?
Prashant, today, I think with technology becoming an equalizer, the opportunities for MSMEs to really flourish are immense. So I start really with that belief at the core of any advice that I give to an MSME. And then I say that be smart, use your size as a competitive advantage and not as a disadvantage by building structures, systems, and rituals, right? Which really allow your tiny organization to be agile, to be flexible, to think that it's day one today and every day, and really build strategies which would serve you, leveraging who you are, right? And that's where I look at really recommending. The first thing is that how do they prioritize investment? Because that's where normally money is poured into things which may not really allow the organization to leverage its size as a competitive advantage, right? So the first thing really is prioritize investment in physical and digital infrastructure so that you are able to secure your workplace, your people, and your data. That's extremely important because that's not usually given a whole lot of importance. And that's where we wait for disasters to happen and take us by surprise, right? It could be as simple as an employee running away with your data one day, and then you are wondering, how did that happen, right? The second is, really being candid with yourself to understand whether you are chasing vanity metrics or business sustainability metrics as an organization. With access now to easier money, there's never easy money, but easier money, especially with startups and sometimes even with MSMEs, one sees that the tendency is to chase vanity metrics because they look glamorous. And sometimes it's really for the external world that we want to portray certain things. But, as Sanjeev was saying, that businesses are there for this lifetime and beyond. They serve a bigger purpose in society of adding value to individuals, communities, economies, and then they have to fulfill that role, and it's not done in 5 years, 10 years. So the ability for that organization to scale effectively and efficiently at the same time is extremely important. So the second thing really is that what are the metrics that you constantly chase as an MSME? Right now, I would say, and it's good advice, I think, in any there's so much of focus on unit economics these days, but really people are using the word cash flows after a long time, especially in the startup ecosystem. And I'm very happy when I hear that much more these days. The third thing I would say is really going back to the discussion between binoculars and the magnifying glass. Now, this is typically difficult in an MSME environment, right? Because you've got a founder or you've got a small leadership team, and a lot of power is vested in them. A lot of decision making rests with them, and they have a feeling that there's nobody who understands, whether you call it the cause or the purpose better than them. Nobody is as driven. People need to be managed. So there's a whole lot of sometimes. Even in a new age business, a lot of old style traditional thinking on how to manage employees, how to manage the business, how to manage different stakeholders. And that's where sometimes the tendency to look good for the today and the tomorrow will take care of itself. So I think that's where we need more proactiveness coming in to be able to anticipate the threats and to prepare much better. So that's the third thing. The fourth thing, and we've spoken so much, in our conversation, all the panelists, in fact, on the people and culture impact on resilience, especially. So I think, it is time to look at creating diverse, empowered teams And that's very, very important. Daniel Pink in his book Drive says that employees today look for three things in any workplace. They look for purpose, they look for mastery, and they look for autonomy. Yeah. And the whole intergenerational issues that Vishal also brought up, I think it's just getting very interesting at the workplace for various reasons. Also very complex when you have to manage smaller teams with higher accountability as MSMEs do. Even more important, that power is not vested in a couple of individuals. That makes them the bottleneck, not an enabler as a leader. So distribute everything. That's really my foundational advice, whether it's communication, whether it is decision-making. Empower people so that they have speed of action when it is required. And that's the agility that really translates into competitive advantage, right? Makes a big difference when you can close a customer complaint right there on the phone. You don't have to talk to 5 people, take approvals, and revert after 5 days, right? But for that, I go back to say, have the structures, systems, and rituals that will make your size a competitive advantage. And even though everything is distributed, what stays constant is your purpose as an anchor. I think that's really, really important, as important for a smaller organization as it is for a bigger organization too.
Very, very, very powerful statements. And I think, you know, as organizations grow in size, you have the leader very often having a very strong calling that let's treat ourselves back as a startup, because that's when you start to really look at the basics and you try to really look at the rituals, which very often get lost, you know, as you start growing up in size. Thank you so much for those aspects there. I'm going to come to Vishal back again with another question. I mean, that's his forte at Indegene today is on so much of online business happening, and you know there's a lot of pressure points and a positive pressure points in terms of using a lot of these online tools as a part of your resilience build up, or a resilience muscle build up. What would you recommend in terms of what online tools help in building resilience, and where do you really recommend them?
Sure. And it's really essentially about improving the effectiveness of the way of work that is emerging today, right? And the platforms and tools that probably all organizations are looking at is really to tackle some of the challenges that we've spoken about already, right? So for example, a very simple thing, right? When you have a group of people in a conference room in the office versus a group of people spread across different locations, I'm sure many organizations are seeing this. For example, is it just becoming informally advisable that, look, anyways, everyone logs in, to the laptop, even if the whole group is present in the office, as something as simple as that, so that everyone is. We spoke about challenge of representation and equality, right? So things like that. So a regular meeting, for example, should it have a moderator, right, to ensure that in a hybrid team, equal voices and ideas are heard, for example, right? So there are executives who still feel today, for example, that the online tools are not good enough for, let's say, a brainstorming session, right, versus just a regular meeting, right? So when you're talking of ideation and brainstorming, right, so how does a hybrid team becoming more effective, right? And there's no easy answers for that, I think still from a tools point of view, even though there are many options available, right? So for example, tools like that, right? So we spoke about the fact that the calendar has completely taken over our lives today, right? So how do you manage the calendar today, right? And if you're just working non-stop, your calendar is just non-stop blocked from morning to evening. Over a period of time, you start seeing some issues around burnout and mental health and things like that, right? So, and that obviously all these are related to people agility, organization agility, your ability to sustain in these practices, and many of these practices are we really be able to sustain for a period of time, right? We've spoken so much about purpose, right? How do you ensure everyone is feeling the same amount of motivation in a hybrid work setup, in a team when people are spread all across? Is there a group of people who's increasingly feeling left out because they are not so much, in your face, in physically presented, right? So So these are really some of these things, and tools are really looking at trying to hopefully address this imbalance, so to speak. Not always successful, but really when you speak of talent, I think that's the whole
Nice
approach.
one. A lot of emphasis on mapping people in terms of what each one requires, whether they are teams or they are smaller groups or they're individuals. I guess that's where you'll really start being able to really put that through. Thanks a lot for that comment and your revert on that. I'm going to come to the last question to the panel before we take in the audience questions, and this one is to Sanjeev, back again. I love the complexity of the questions to you, Sanjeev. I mean, I really rely on you taking this up. A lot related to what we spoke before about the uncertainty keeps moving up and down, and I don't think we are going to be anywhere staying foreign to this term for the near future or for the long term. The table stakes like financial portfolios and organizational resilience are extremely critical to manage from a leadership point of view. From your desk, how do you think leaders should really approach these table stakes in the changing era?
Yeah, I think, Prashant, first of all, I must admit that nobody has a perfect answer for this. Yeah, I think it's a lot complex than sometimes it appears. But I think I like Shilpa saying that keep cash flows in. I am always very, very focused on that organization should have cash at hand. So it's about trying to find out what are the priorities that are relevant for today and tomorrow. So for example, if it is about financial strength, then it is about how do you manage situations? How do you manage your financial cash flows? How do you manage working capital? Let me paint a picture for you right now to say why important it is, because you saw pandemic winding down slightly. We still don't know where we are going with it, but at least winding down slightly. As a science guy, I should be careful in saying where it is going. But you saw the war coming through. Yeah. So I think we are entering a cycle, like having entered some cycles in the past, where these cycles last for more than 10 to 15 years. They don't last for 2-3 years. So we are going to see a decade or decade and a half of uncertainty in the world that is going to go through. If you talk about inflation, I think we have to also recognize the fact that in such situations, economic indicators reflect it as inflation, but in reality, it is a new set of benchmark for pricing. So it's different than inflation alone. So if these things are happening, then your financial management has to be relevant enough for that situation. So I always joke this, that, for example, look at inventory. There is nothing like just-in-time inventory anymore, which was glorified in the past. There is just-in-case inventory today. Yeah. So, but it's what it is. It's true. Also, portfolio means relevance to customers. No portfolio is good enough if it is not relevant to customers. And therefore, when you think about portfolio as a portfolio of businesses, portfolio of products, portfolio of people, you have to start thinking that what is relevant for future, and what is relevant, what is going to be the main aspect which is going to make your customers feel better, feel happy, or feel satiated with what they have received. So if that experience has to be good, then you have to keep thinking. And therefore, I have always believed that companies who believe that their portfolio is forever are companies who never last forever.
Absolutely.
So companies really have problems with that. So you have to always keep thinking that are you in the relevant space and business? So for example, I've started to believe that in pharmaceutical or healthcare industry, for example, pharmaceutical companies can stop believing that they are pharmaceutical companies. They'll start believing they are healthcare companies and start looking at a wider offering, so that their patient who is turning out to be a consumer now and no longer trying to behave like a patient who is to passively listen to things, better be prepared to offer a better solution. So as long as we used to create verticals in business, but the important point is now to see horizontally how businesses will work through, so to ensure a complete solution the important thing is to understand that it is always better to prepare for a changing, disruptive world, which is not going to remain the same, and things are going to go in directions which you cannot anticipate many a times. But is your business resilient enough to understand that these changes could happen, and therefore I am working towards it? So managements and leaders have to be very cognizant of the fact that they have to take higher responsibility of understanding how a situation can pan out. Don't, for example, we saw many organizations, pandemic hai, problem hai, I don't have enough cash, let me dump employees. Yeah, but that's because you're not realize that what are you really, created a situation where that situations can go wrong, and therefore how you can respond to it. We said, okay, this is a situation, work from home, and we now call work from home hybrid. But in our country, the primary sector and secondary sector is so big that hybrid working or work from home is a very small population, but a noisy population. And we make too much noise about it. Yeah. So in reality, 80% of the people don't have an opportunity to do this. Yeah. So how do we ensure that 80% feel good about what they are doing? So that is where we will have to keep thinking, because if you see everybody discussing hybrid working, this work, but are we really discussing people who have to get back to work in reality? You also look at work from home as, in I don't want to name the country, but 7 times rise in mental health issues, and therefore going to counselors in countries of high employment because of work from home. Is it a healthy situation? Have we ever thought about that? One angle we thought about convenience, but did we think about what happens otherwise? So organizations will have to start thinking about these things also, that their decisions impact a lot more than their business, than their environment, but also their employees. So it's a tough one, but Prashant, I think the more important point is that leaderships who cannot think of a more than 180-degree view of everything always will have a problem. I don't call it 360 because, what is important is more or less 180 degrees view. And I think Shilpa's comment on binoculars and, there's basically, I look at it as a schizophrenic leader who can think for today and think for tomorrow, So, so then these are very, very important things, much deeper thoughts, but Prashant, I think it's a much bigger subject also.
Perfectly. Thank you so much. We are dot on 7:30. If you all permit, I might just take in one question each from a set of questions that have come into each one. In case you are hard pressed for time, then I'll have to, probably wrap up the session and give it to Anjali. Are you okay for a 5-minute move ahead?
Prashant, 5 minutes is fine. Yeah.
Yes, I'll just take one question each, and I would like you all to be a little quick on the answer. I'm just going to pick it up on random, and I'm just going to pick up some questions that are very, very small so that I don't waste much time. Sabita, I'm going to pass on this question of yours to Shilpa. How does one manage risks when one doesn't know how long these risks will remain at large? And if you can just get your answer in a minute, I'll be, happy about that.
So there's never going to be a perfect way to be able to anticipate and also understand what really the risk is all about and how long it will last. But I think what's important, like when we build any muscle, the idea is to show up every day and make that a habit. And over a period of time, you will become better and more intuitive in terms of understanding what risks are out there. And time period doesn't matter, but your ability to attack it and see it as an opportunity rather than getting stuck on it as a problem. I think that's the mindset change that we require. And that then allows you to build the skill set and create the tool set, which will allow you to deal with that risk. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being straight on and crisp. There's a nice question I'm going to pass this on to Vishal because it all happens to be with the calendar. And it's a very practical, handy tip that maybe, wanted out of you. The issue is that you no longer fill your calendar, but your subordinates or superiors and peers have a look at the vacant space in the calendar. What's your recommendation to that, Vishal? And I'm sure this is a live one.
I think a lot of people use this, which is actually first block your calendar for yourself and then look at, so block time for yourself where you are able to do some of the thinking, creative work, etc. Because if you lax on that, then you find that the calendar is kind of ruining your life. So first block time for yourself and then look at the other meetings. That's what I use.
Nice one. Thank you so much. And I'm going to pick up the last one from Vijay to Sanjeev. Do vision and mission statements of the organization to include resilience as a part for the larger cause really be relevant?
So let me disappoint the person who asked the question by saying that you can put anything in your vision and mission statement, but it's about the translation. I think just putting them on vision and mission statement has never helped companies. It is about how do you how leaders translate it into real action and trying to showcase that, look, what an organization means. And I go back to my point that organization should be able to explain its cause. And if its cause is explained, then vision and mission statements will make sense. We spend too much time in crafting those, but we spend too little time in explaining those. So let's be cautious of keep adding things to the statements.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you so much. And, I think I appreciate and respect you all taking just a minute to give your answers. With this, I, would like to thank you for your time and, hand the session back to Anjani for the finale.
Thank you very much. Oh my God, what an amazing conversation. I don't even know where to start. As I was sort of taking it all in, some of the things that really came about were creating strong anchoring called purpose, resilient leaders committed to purpose, trust, the speed of trust, and embracing people and culture. Asking the right questions, start, stop, continue was the top highlight. I love the statement by Vishal, the soul that we retain and the muscle that we build. Amazing. How can we handle different generations to adapt to this new setup was a very interesting question. And I'm actually already wondering what could go in there if I had to write an article, honestly. Sanjeev, the organizational culture is ever evolving. People perform because they have a cause. What a powerful statement. Cause impacts sustainability because it supports an entire ecosystem. In all of this, mapping people almost stands at the top. 180-degree view of everything. Today, tomorrow, what's the priority? This entire wealth of discussion has left me reeling with ideas for our next Forthright conversation. So thank you very much. It was brilliant. Thank you, Prashant, for steering us through this insightful conversation seamlessly and stitching it together. Thank you, team. Thank you, Echo Maven, for conceptualizing this for us. And thank you, audience, for being amazing. We hope to see you again. Thank you very, very much. It was a brilliant conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and have a nice evening.